I agree with most of what Daniel said. Most, you know.
Okay, let's hear what you didn't agree.
One thing.
Hey, welcome. And we've got a special episode today. We're going to be talking about the nationalization of lithium in Chile. Let's break this down. So we got my co-host, Luis Sáenz. Hello, Lucho. And
hi, everyone. Paula. Hi, Daniel.
And we have a special guest today, Daniel Weinstein, who is a Chilean lawyer who's fully specialized in mining law and everything related to that in Chile. So it's going to be a good one. Let's start. So today we're going to be talking about what was the announcement, what was actually said during the announcement. And secondly, we're going to talk about what was the situation in Chile, what is the situation until now, what was in terms of the macro view, in terms of all the companies working in the country and the juniors. And at the end, so make sure you stay until the end, because at the end, we're going to talk about what we think will happen with all of these changes and proposed changes, and what we think, our opinion, according to our experience and our views. And that's going to be it.
Thank you very much for the invitation, first of all. Thanks, Luis. Thanks, Paola. It's a pleasure to be with you now. Thank you to everybody that will be listening and seeing this.
Perfect. So we've had a massive amount of news and discussions over the weekend and over the end of last week about this fact that the announcement that Chile's president made about a change in the lithium policy, but it was like vastly reported as a nationalization. So we're gonna break this down. Daniel, let's start with you. So we're gonna first, we want to know what was the announcement, because obviously the announcement was in Spanish, and if someone doesn't know Spanish, they're not going to understand. So can you please summarize the actual announcement, please?
Of course, the announcement was made by our President Gabriel Boric, on Thursday night in the television, and he announced the new national lithium strategy. Not a nationalization. I will start with that. It is not a nationalization. That's the first thing. So what is? This is a strategy. It is not a policy. It is much less a new institutionality, a new regulation. It's not that. It is just a set of high-level ideas or principles which aim to promote the development of lithium with a public-private partnership, public-private collaboration. As I mentioned, this doesn't change the regulation, but it's just a strategy. It's a strategy that is based a lot in the ideas of the left coalition that govern us. But having said that, and just to be super clear, it is not a nationalization. It doesn't involve a nationalization. It doesn't involve any act that doesn't have some legal precedent, and also doesn't involve to expropriate or do anything to any company without its consent. So we should be very clear about that. It's not the same of the regulation, and in fact, to implement this strategy, at least the whole strategy, some change in the regulations will have to be made. But the government doesn't have the majority in the Congress. So again, it's very difficult to know whether this strategy will be, I mean, first, what will be the result of this strategy? And second, the most important, what will happen in 3 more years when our president is not anymore in the government?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So I think the fact that this was reported so widely as a nationalization is kind of confusing to me, because I can't really I couldn't track the first time who was the one that made the first, I will call it mistake. It could have been, oh, we want more clicks, so let's just say it like this, and it's gonna get a lot of eyes. But like, why is this so, poorly communicated? I'm not sure. I don't have the answer other than what I've just said.
In the announcement, the president says that he will be looking to have a majority stake in the current operations in the Salar de Atacama. That's are one of SQM and Albemarle. Those two companies, they are not owners of their concessions. They are leasing the concessions. So basically what the president says is after the lease ends, he would like that the state owns at least half of those projects. So it's not that he would be expropriating anything. It's just, and probably that's where is the confusion, where that he said that after the lease of the contracts ends, he would like the government to have at least half of the companies or the projects.
Yeah, and the lease for Albemarle, we know that the lease ends in 2043, right?
Yeah.
Do you know for SQM?
Yeah, 2030, 7 years.
Okay, yeah, that would be a little closer. Okay, so that was the announcement. Now, in terms of what the situation, because I think it's going to be really helpful for people to understand the depth and the breadth of activity in lithium in Chile, which is probably not what the sort of casual investor or the casual market participant expects, because we're talking about a country that has the top two by market cap companies in the territory. Produces, I think it's always like second, sometimes has been first producer, but now it's Australia. I think it's going to be really interesting for us to explain to the audience sort of how big is the activity and a qualification of the different areas. Lucho, do you wanna have, because you've got a bit of a lot of experience in working with Chilean lithium, do you wanna give an initial comment in terms of having been managed for many years a lithium explorer in Chile? Do you want to start with your part?
Sure. So I mean, just in terms of experience that you mentioned, Paola, I mean, I was founder and CEO of Li3 Energy, which has what today is the Maricunga project, which is the most advanced development project in Chile. Okay, until very recently, I was still a director of one of the three shareholders of Maricunga. Today, Maricunga is wholly owned by Lithium Power International, which is an Australian listed company. And it's got a feasibility study. It's got a project separated into two stages. Stage one has a feasibility study. It's got its environmental permit, is basically ready to go, and we can go into that. But the way I look at when I saw the announcement, I mean, for me it was fairly glaring, right? I mean, there's the Salar de Atacama, and then there's the other salars, okay? And in that, I basically tend to have like maybe separated into three tiers, right? The first tier being SQM and Albemarle, which are in a special situation because, as Daniel mentioned, they don't own the properties. They lease them from the government. So really what the government's asking for is, I want to benefit from what is mine. I mean, that's what it boils down to. And I don't think that's unreasonable. Obviously, Albemarle has until 2043. So even the CEO in an interview said, we're good until 2043, but, we're sure that this will open opportunities for potentially expand our operations. For SQM, it's a little bit more complicated, if you will, and it's no. It's a well-known fact that the relationship between SQM and the Chilean government hasn't always been very good. In fact, probably 90% of the time hasn't been very good. So it's not a surprise in my view, and again, just an opinion. The strategy has a name, and it's SQM, okay? But of course, you have to cover the rest, okay? So you got that SQM and Albemarle in Tier 1 and Atacama in Tier 1. In Tier 2, I will actually put Maricunga. It is the second largest salar and richest salar in Chile. And as I said, it has a project that's already in an advanced stage of development. Codelco actually has properties in Maricunga, in the same salar, adjoining LPI's Maricunga project. As I said, Maricunga is separate in stage 1 and 2. Stage 1 is made up of concessions that are grandfathered, okay? And we can go into a whole discussion about what that means, but really, according to law and interpretation, and there's a number of nuances to that. Stage 1 does not need a SEO, is exempt from a SEO, okay, which is the lithium exploitation contract that was also mentioned in the strategy. For stage 2, which are concessions under the new mining regime, it was always envisioned that stage was naturally going to be done alongside with Codelco. And in that sense, what the strategy does, the National Lithium Strategy does, is actually gives Codelco the mandate to actually do something, okay? Which is something that was lacking in previous administrations. It was, well, Codelco has properties there and can do and cannot do. Obviously, Codelco is one of the largest copper producers in the world and has bigger fish to fry, so to speak, right? It has priorities in copper that are much, much more important for its bottom line than any kind of lithium project. Now, Codelco and ENAMI have the mandate to bring something forward. And I think in that sense, the strategy is good for the Maricunga project and the Salar de Maricunga and its development, okay, with other players that are there as well. The third tier, and an important tier, obviously, is the future production. And that's basically a number of junior companies that are in Chile that have been exploring. And because of the stage of mostly early exploration that they're at, haven't really had to explain the whole Chilean legislation and lithium being strategic and the whole story that, for example, I've lived personally with the whole SEOL and the permitting and stuff like that, and that's for another podcast entirely. But now those companies actually have a path forward, because once again, what this strategy states is that there will be a national lithium company, that the government will take a predominant position in future projects. It mandates this new national lithium company, but specifically ENAMI and Codelco, to enter into contracts. So, there is a path forward, very much like there was in Argentina in the different provinces when effectively the provincial governments would take a 5-8% stake in a project, but would actually, help in taking that project forward. In Argentina, which is very decentralized, okay, it was up to every province. And I thought that was a good thing for Argentina, because even though you were, handing over part of, a small stake in your project, you actually had a way forward. And hence the development of projects in Argentina has been much quicker than they have been in Chile. And that's what Chile is trying to overcome now. Maybe a little late, but we're still early in the lithium game, I think. So that's how I sort of see the differentiation, Paula and Daniel.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. Going to, what was the situation? What is the situation now? Before this announcement, it's going to take some time for that to actually eventuate. So, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the current situation, as you said, it's been, and I've talked about this, several times, the situation of today was limited to a very small number of companies, with just 2 producing and a handful of explorers, some more advanced, as you know, LPI and CleanTech and Wolf, I think is the other one, and a very, very small number because of all these restrictions. So Chile hasn't had the opportunity to benefit really, you know, in a wide, at least in terms of number of companies. Obviously, again, the country produces a lot of lithium, so so that's, you know, that's true. Daniel,
Paola,
yeah.
Paola, just to, I mean, one thing that we haven't touched on, and I don't think anyone's touched on, is, you know, what else could happen in Atacama? Because, I mean, really, Atacama is a huge salar, and only a small part of that salar is being exploited by Albemarle and SQM. I mean, could something else happen in Atacama? Okay, I mean, one of the things that was very clear when I was very active in Chile and looking at the salars is that, I mean, Atacama is incredibly rich. Second is Maricunga, but then that third tier, you know, the grades of lithium that you get there are much lower in most of the cases, almost comparable to the higher grades in Argentina. Okay, but you know, you're talking about half of the grade that SQM has. Okay, a number of these salars, because they're salars, are in protected areas or near protected areas. Maricunga, for example, half of the salar of Maricunga is within a protected area, which means that the Maricunga project is in a zona soit, you know, an area of influence, which actually requires a higher degree of permitting on the environmental side. So, I mean, really, one of the objectives, I would think, is to think beyond SQM and Albemarle. You know, is there room to grow lithium production in the Salar de Atacama? Because it is the richest salar, and it's a very large salar. And you know, the new technologies that are coming out, that are being widely tested and stuff like that, could really make a difference into future production in Atacama and elsewhere in Chile, obviously.
Yeah, you bring a good point, because we didn't mention that part of the announcement was actually that they were gonna prioritize direct lithium extraction. I don't remember if he said it with the you know, the words, but he spoke
they say that, in fact, they say that it would be a requirement.
Yeah.
Not only prioritize, a requirement.
Yeah, a requirement. So that also means that they're trying to, you know, move away from the evaporation ponds and all that, to try and that was another point of contention for the people reading, because, you know, even though it's a new technology that, you know, I'm super interested in, you know, we're following a lot of companies that are trying to do that, but it's still somewhat unproven, you know, in a massive scale. So that was something that people were kind of commenting as well, as like, why are we doing, like, we understand why he's trying to do it, like he was trying to talk to his base, like, let's not forget that, like the speech was a political speech, it wasn't a business development speech or let's bring investments to Chile. But you have to read like in so much depth, and that's why we're doing this, because, you know, that speech alone created all this miscommunication because of how it was, you know, done. Daniel, if a company wanted to go into Chile and start exploring, what would be the framework that they would need to follow, if there is one, and you can explain the different steps and the things that they can and the things that they can't do, or who can actually explore in Chile?
Sure. Well, the first thing to say is that the regulation of lithium is a regulation that is completely different to the regulation of all other minerals. So we are the number one producer of copper, but copper has a completely different regulation than lithium. Very briefly, 1979, lithium was almost not used for anything, just for glasses, ceramics, and, well, as a medicine. But we have a military government, and they believe that lithium will be like the next nuclear fuel in the future. So they decided that only the government will be able to exploit the lithium. This was 1979, and they basically created two exceptions. The first one are, Luis mentioned, concessions granted prior to 1979. And the second exception was if a private company is granted a special operation lithium contract. To put in context, so far in the 40 years of history of this regulation, only one special operation lithium contract has been granted, and was granted to Codelco, the national company. So this is something that you have to have in mind. It is not like copper that we have thousands of copper producers. We only have two, and in fact, those two are not even in those two exceptions. They're basically leasing some properties of the government. But when a company enters to Chile, the first thing that they should know is that to exploit the lithium, they should either have concessions granted prior to 1979 or have a special operation contract. Also, there is like a third option, but it's very similar to the special operation contract. This is an administrative concession. But we'll not talk about that, because at the end of the day, nobody would be granted that, but a special operation contract. So there is a lot of uncertainty. Now we have a lot of companies here exploring for lithium, but they didn't have until now any certainty that they will get a special operation contract. As we said, only one special operation contract have been granted so far, and to Codelco. Now, one of the positive things about the announcement is that the government is open to grant. I think that this is the first time probably that it is said that the government is open to grant to a lot of companies special operations contracts. This special operation contract will be, as the announcement said, they will be tendered. So basically, Codelco or Enami will make a tender. A company will put his tender there, will tender, and if they discover something interesting, they will have the priority to partner with the government to develop that project. One interesting thing is that the announcement, it mentioned a lot the word majority stakeholder. But if you read between the lines, it says that if the project is not strategic, the government it's not mandatory for the government to be the majority stakeholder. And what is the example that we saw in the announcement of a strategic project? Escribían Salar de Atacama, huge project, probably the most important in the world. So, although we don't know what will mean to be strategic or not, we can assume that most projects in Chile, by number, not by size, will not be strategic, and therefore the government could be a minority shareholder there. And I think that that's very interesting, because that opened a lot of doors to companies that are currently exploring for lithium, and to other companies that want to enter now. Now, for the first time in decades, there is a clear path. So far, we didn't have that clear path. Companies were, I think, that crossing fingers that they will get a special operation contract, but there was not strategy. And the law gave a lot of discretionality to the government. So I think that in that sense, this strategy is good news for smaller companies that want to operate projects in Chile.
Yeah, I think
Paula, just to complement that, I mean, I've been involved in lithium in Chile for the last 14 years. Okay. And when I started with lithium in Chile, obviously I knew that lithium was strategic, but my rationale was Chile is a mining country, a lot of common sense in Chile, very business oriented. I never imagined that it would take 14 years to actually see a path forward. Never in my life. You cannot imagine how many times I wished my project was in Argentina instead of Chile. And that's a hell of a statement. Okay. So you know what? I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with what Daniel says. I mean, for the first time, there is a path forward. It's not a clear path forward, but there is a path forward. I mean, something is happening. There have been a number of lithium commissions in every administration for the last 3-4 administrations has had a lithium commission. I have really good friends that have been in that lithium commission, so I can't talk bad about that lithium commission. Okay, but I mean, there was a lot of talk and very, very little action. This is the first time that you're actually seeing a path forward, and I think that's a breath of fresh air. And I mean, you mentioned that the speech was a political speech, and yes, it was, okay, but there's also a couple of things that are very real in the lithium market, right? The lithium industry, until the new direct lithium extraction technologies came around, hadn't looked at innovation or efficiency for decades because there was no need for that, right? I mean, lithium only became popular about 15 years ago. So, I mean, and that has it's gone through waves, right? I mean, we've seen, you can see it in the historical prices. So, I mean, the recovery of lithium through evaporation ponds is incredibly low. It takes a long time, and it depends on Mother Nature. It depends on evaporation. Now, I mean, with climate change going on and everything, the last thing you want to do is depend on Mother Nature, right? I mean, so, this change was coming anyway. I mean, the people who are focused on direct lithium extraction, of course, they tell you they want to be green and they want to be good for the environment, and I'm sure they do. Part of their heart does. The other part is the dollars they're going to make, because I mean, I've seen POSCO actually had a pilot plant in Maricunga, in Copiapó, and I was there to see it. I was in the inauguration. I saw the tests. I mean, this thing was recovering 95% of the lithium, as opposed to the typical 50 or 60 of the evaporation ponds, and it was recovering it under 8 hours, as opposed to the 15 to 18 months that you get through evaporation. So, yeah, it is a political speech, but it's also very close to reality. I mean, that is the future of the lithium industry: efficiency, innovation, that's going to, recover more in a lot less time. And, CapEx is what it is, but that's what you want: lithium now, not lithium in 18 months.
Yeah, no, I think I didn't mean so much the DLE part in terms of the political angle, but it was more of a like, it was painful to me to listen to it, because he was like not being clear and saying all these things. So like, yeah, we need to be doing this and this, and like, yeah, okay, but tell me something concrete. And that's sort of what I was going to, but I think, and that's probably one of the reasons why the misinterpretations have been so wide, because he was being so political and so general that the inferences were like, yeah, as Daniel said, he mentioned nationalization of copper, and people said, oh, okay, this is a nationalization speech, let's stop listening and let's just make our headline. And that got, spread out everywhere. Okay, so we wanted our opinion of this deal, which we've gone a little bit into that with what Lucho just spoke about, but our opinion in terms of whether this is something good for the country and people should be kind of looking forward to see how this can evolve, and at the same time what we think is going to happen in terms of what are different steps that we will need to see for this to move forward. So let's try and sum up that. I'll go to Daniel first.
Perfect. Well, the first thing that is worth mention, that I mentioned at the beginning, is that the regulation of the lithium hasn't changed. This doesn't change the regulation of the lithium. That is the same regulation that we have been having for 40 years. a regulation where, for example, for commercializing lithium, you need an authorization from the nuclear committee. Why? Because in 1979, it was thought that this was it would be the next nuclear big thing. But everybody knows that that's not the case. But still, you need an authorization from the nuclear committee. So again, the regulation hasn't changed.
Yet.
If the president
Yet.
but at least in the announcement, the only clear things that will change in the regulation are the creation of the National Lithium Company that will require a majority in the Congress that our president doesn't have. So that's important to mention. For now, Codelco and Enami are kind of the attorneys in fact of the government. They will act on behalf of the government. But once this company is created, if it's created, they will start to do the thing. That's one thing. The other thing that may need to change is the environmental regulation. Because, for example, right now, you just cannot say to SQM, hey, you cannot use the ponds. But in the announcement, it says that it is required to use these new, more environmental friendly technologies. So there will need to be a change also in the environmental regulation. Nothing was said regarding the rest of the lithium regulation. Personally, and this is my personal opinion, I think that we should change the regulation, probably in a way that our government now is not going in that way. In my view, the best thing to do, it would be like to give lithium the same regulation than the rest of the other commodities. We're the #1 producer of copper in the world by far. Peru, my dear Luis, is half of us, and it's the number 2. So we have been doing. You mentioned, Luis, Chile is a mining country, has been doing things right, is pro-business. So personally, we have liked something like that. Having said that, I think that this is a good opportunity, especially for smaller companies. I will not talk about SQM because SQM, well, it's a huge company, but it's just one company. But for example, I have been talking with investors in lithium, both current and potential investors. Most of them were scared about what they heard. Hey, nationalization, control of the government. But what I tell them is, okay, how that could be worse than the situation that we have now? Why will it be worse? Now you don't have any certainty that you will have the right to exploit. Now there is a path. And in fact, let's say that now you are exploring a project and you just don't want to partner with the government. You just can go and request a special operation contract because the law hasn't changed. Yeah. So again, this is a strategy. This is a high-level strategy, not a policy, not a change of regulation, just some high-level ideas to develop lithium in a public-private partnership or collaboration. So I think that we will see more movement of lithium, especially in what Luis called Tier 3. I think that the Tier 3 companies will be benefited from this policy. Tier 2, I don't know yet. Tier 1, probably not. But I think that there is a good opportunity for lithium investors to come to Chile, to learn about Chile. And also, like Enami and Codelco are both state-owned companies, but they are pro-business. And they have people that have been doing business for dozens of years. So I think it's a good opportunity for Chile. It's a good opportunity for especially Tier 3 companies. Personally, I would have preferred another strategy or even a change of the regulation. Maybe we'll see that in the future. Because as I said at the beginning, the regulation hasn't changed. This is just some ideas. But maybe in 3 years, if we have a right-wing government, we'll have a different regulation. Who knows? We have now a new constitutional process. In May 7th, we will choose our delegates. Who knows? Maybe the constitution say otherwise about the lithium. But what I can say, and this is due to my experience in Chile, I believe that any change, even the change that may happen to the lithium strategy, just announce it, will be pro-business. And in fact, I think that we talked this before we just start to record. The Minister of Finance have had to say that, hey, not in all the cases, it will be the state, the majority shareholder. Other authorities have said, well, we have to admit the government doesn't have experts in lithium. So basically, I think that, as you mentioned, Paola, I think that this is, I mean, like any government, not just this, when they announce something so important for the country, it will be kind of a political announcement. It's the president. It's not a technical authority. It's the president. So it is a kind of political authority. But I believe that any change, I believe that in fact some change to the strategy will come in places. There are some issues that were not even mentioned in the strategy, and I think that all those situations will be solved in a more pro-business way than what people may think. That's what I believe based on my experience of almost 20 years working in mining in Chile.
Okay. And Lucho, what is your take?
I agree with most of what Daniel said. Most, you know.
Okay, let's hear what you didn't agree.
Well, one thing, it's not that I agree with him. I mean, it's just that, you know, as we were talking, just like it occurred to me, you know, what happens with the rest of the Atacama, right? I mean, this national lithium company is a necessity, particularly if the government wants to have participation. It's absolutely necessary, and it's not a new concept. It's been talked about for the last 10 years of creating a national lithium company, right? For some time, people talked about ENAMI sort of becoming the pseudo national lithium company. In fact, there were discussions that Codelco's concessions and properties in Maricunga and other salars would be transferred to ENAMI, and ENAMI would be the one that negotiates. The thing is that, you know, I know about mining, right? If you talk to me about soybean projects, don't know much about soybean projects, you really don't want to talk to me about soybean projects because I don't know anything about soybean projects. Okay, ENAMI and Codelco are copper producers. ENAMI is a copper processor more than a copper miner. Codelco is a copper miner and a copper processor. You know, lithium from the salars is a completely different process, completely different business. I mean, you know, extracting lithium from salars, it's not like mining. I mean, it's much more similar to other industries, resource industries.
It's a chemical process.
Yeah. So, and the extraction process is a lot more like, you know, natural gas or oil and gas, right? I mean, you know, you're putting the onus on ENAMI and Codelco to really do transactions in an arena that is not their expertise. Can they hire the people? Of course they can hire the people. I would actually say that, you know, even though Chile is one of the largest producers of lithium in the world, the expertise in Chile on lithium is relatively limited because for the last, you know, I don't know how many years, for the last few decades, there's been 2 employers. So if you don't work for SQM or Albemarle, you don't have a job. Where are you going to go? To Argentina. You're going to
go to Argentina. Yeah, that's what's happened.
Like, you know, 25 projects, right? You could even go to Bolivia and hope that the Bolivian government, you know, hires you for something. But so, I mean, that part concerns me. Okay, it concerns me because as much as I as I trust the guys from Enami and Codelco to be good business people, the technical expertise there is lacking. And if they do a transaction where the technical expertise happens to be wrong, okay, and they have, whether it be a majority or a minority stake on a project that fails, okay, because in the end, I mean, the risk in lithium mining is very much a mining risk, just like it is in any other kind of mining. And you depend on, you know, the expertise to really make decisions, not only on the financial side, but on the technical side. So if there's a screw up there, you know, people are going to get blamed. And in general, people don't like to get blamed. So, I mean, that's, for me, you know, creating a national lithium company is a priority, because that way, you know that within that company, you expect you will have professionals from the lithium industry that will be able to evaluate any transaction that comes. Go
May I
ahead.
play a bit the devil advocate? And who will be the people that will be part or the expert of that lithium national company?
You
Well,
have to
hopefully
build. You have to
XSUM
build.
guys, or, you know, they'll bring guys from Argentina, you know, but at least, I mean, to believe that Codelco now, okay, and in Codelco has the huge challenge of not only keeping up their copper production, but growing it, okay, and that's a challenge as a company, for any company. But it's even a greater challenge for Codelco, because Codelco finances the Chilean people. Codelco is the largest contributor to the Chilean government, and hence the Chilean people. Codelco finances Chile. So, I mean, if I'm Codelco, you know, my priority is to focus on the copper, which is my expertise. And I'm not really sure I'm going to hire a team of 20 people for, you know, negotiating whatever goes on in the Salar de Maricunga or in any other transaction on lithium that comes on. I mean, I might be completely wrong, okay, but I mean, that is a big question mark. That poses a big question mark for me, and I think, you know, that makes it more urgent to actually make the National Lithium Company a reality. And you're right. I mean, that National Lithium Company will have a challenge in attracting people, okay, but you know, Codelco doesn't have a problem attracting professionals, because Codelco is the standard of the Chilean industry, right? You know, if people go to work for, you know, BHP versus Codelco, it's probably because of the paycheck, but not because of the prestige, right? I mean, you know, Codelco is a very prestigious employer.
By the way, as an ex-BHP, I can say that many ex-BHP has been poached by Codelco. So it's not even that Codelco pay less than BHP.
So I mean, yeah, I think that National Lithium Company will take time to evolve, but you're also talking about a long-term strategy for the country, right? So I mean, that would be my only comment.
Yeah, I think what I like, for me, this doesn't change much today, as we say. Like, this is not yet it's not yet regulation. It's an announcement, and as all announcements, a lot of things need to happen for these to, you know, first become regulation. So you talked about the you know, the president doesn't have majority, you know, to get these laws passed as law very easily. So there will be a lot of negotiation and things that need to happen for this to actually eventuate. And he's up for, well, he can't be reelected, which we talked about. And so this for sure, there's another president coming. And as the political sentiment you were talking about, that it's probably not going to be his party, so it's going to be the opposite party. So that may also throw a wrench into this. But if we summarize for investors, like, not a lot has changed for now. Not a lot will change for a little bit of time. But if this or the spirit of this actually gets past all these hurdles and the different steps, it can actually be much better, because what we have now is very limited. So I think that's what people don't know massively. Like in general, people think it's just, yeah, you go to Chile, you explore for copper, you explore for lithium, doesn't matter, it's the same. It's not the same, and it hasn't been the same for 40 years, over 40 years. So this could be really good, and I think it's going to be important for hopefully the media starts to pick up the actual news and explain. I don't really think they're going to do it, but it doesn't get clicks. Just say, no, we made a mistake, it's not that. Yeah.
And I think that probably the media, they are looking into the sensationalist news. It always sells more newspapers to
Clickbait.
well, newspaper. Nobody reads now newspaper, but internet you have more readers. If you say Chile is nationalizing the lithium industry, that if you're saying Chile has a strategy that doesn't change a lot the things, and but it opened the path, especially for small producers. That will not sell. But that's complicated, and I really, in the next few days, I will have conversation with bankers that are interested in learning what is happening, and I really hope that everybody that is involved in the industry can make their own research and see what is changed, what has not changed, and then take the decision. But the worst thing that somebody could do is take the decision just because a media outlet say Chile will nationalize.
Yeah, but at the same time, you can't blame them. Like, the people that sold off Albemarle or SQM or any other company, like, if the media says that, like, fair enough. Like, why would you not believe them?
If the media says that, it must be true. I mean,
it's a problem. It's a problem.
It is a problem, Paula, but I mean, if you're a sophisticated investor, I mean, you don't jump at the first
Of
thing
course.
that comes. The SQM sell-off, well, the Albemarle sell-off, I think was, I think that was crazy. Okay, I mean, I think that was a complete overreaction. The SQM sell, I can see more. I can see more reason for that. But for me, frankly, I mean, this was not really an invitation by the Chilean president to have SQM come to the table. It was more a suggestion. But look who it's coming from,
Yeah.
The owner of the restaurant basically asked the cook to come over and talk about the menu for the next few years.
Yeah,
that's the way I see it. I mean, I mean, of course, SQM can say, I mean, I have my contracts until 2030, but really, the message was, yes, you have your contracts until 2030, and that's when your contracts will end, unless we sit down and maybe you share some of that $75,000 lithium price scenario already. I mean, and let's not forget that. I mean, SQM was a huge contributor in taxes, and royalties, payments.
More than Codelco for the first time.
I mean, it was something. It was huge. It was huge. So I mean, they're already an important contributor. But that's where you're going to see the fireworks from this national lithium strategy. What I hope is that those fireworks don't distract the tier 3, for example, which is where you can potentially see, not a new Salar de Atacama, but a number of smaller projects that actually start creating a lithium industry. I mean, one of the problems, if you will, with the copper industry in Chile is that, it's 10 big players, 3 mid-sized players, and then sort of artisanal mining, as opposed to Peru that has a very big, mid-tier mining sector, which provides a lot of employment and stuff like that. I mean, you want to see more developments in the mid-tier and smaller projects. And this is obviously the time to do it in lithium.
Going just as a last comment in terms of your mention is like, yeah, obviously sophisticated investors are not, I think they're not the cause of this, sell-off. I think it's probably more retail, and because they don't have the tools to actually understand in more depth what does this really mean, and they can only go by the headlines. So I think it's hurting more retail investors. In Australia, there's such a big proportion of the lithium investment community that is super focused on lithium, because the retail investors are focused on lithium because they got used to playing in this area. Something that I can't know yet, but one interesting point is in the US, among the biggest investment banks and institutional investors, your funds, your ETFs, the SQM and Albemarle, all of them hold it. Like, obviously it's like a minuscule proportion of total holdings, because they normally, if they're not mining, obviously, like hedge funds. And so it's going to be interesting to see as soon as they file the 13Fs, how did they read this situation? Because if they also reacted and sold off as the rest of the market, it's going to be more evident that the communication was not interpreted by anyone, not even the guys that should know.
Something very interesting, but I think that this is just worth mention, but we cannot talk about this because it will be like for another 2 hours of podcast. I don't think that and this is just me, I don't think that SQM will just accept what is happening right now. Remember, the contract ends in 2030, and this government ends in 2026. So now probably the way the SQM has, I'm not completely sure that they have a lot of lawyers now reading like for the number 10 time the contract, seeing how they could fight that. Because in fact there is a clause. I don't want to talk about this clause, but there is a clause that is a little bit ambiguous. And remember, so the contract will end 2030, and this government ends in 2026. So again, I don't think that SQM will just accept this, and probably they will give a fight, and maybe the government will end up saying, okay, and I'm just saying, okay, we will not be the majority shareholders, give us 20% or something like that. Yeah. So I think that this is just the beginning of the history with SQM.
Yeah. No, I agree. All right, I think we've talked about this in depth. If we're done with our opinions, we can close this off. Good. All right, guys, this was really interesting, exciting conversation, and we're gonna have to be looking at this space very closely to see what happens.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. And who knows, like maybe in 5 more years, I don't think that lithium will be the next copper, but lithium has the potential that in Chile has not been yet explored. We have a lot of potential. By the way, we should be #1 producer in the world. It should not be Australia. We have largest reserves, and we have it is in brines, so it is easy, it is cheaper. And we have, as you mentioned, we have the Salar de Atacama. The Salar de Atacama is a miracle of the nature. It's the equivalent of Escondida to copper. So hopefully we will do a good job. And this is, sorry, I was showing something. This is copper. This is native copper. And this is what has made Chile the country that is today. I really hope that lithium could also contribute to Chile in the way as copper has been doing in the last decades. Hopefully it will be like that.
Yeah, I think we need lithium in all different shapes and forms. So we can Canadian, Australian, Chilean, Argentinian, we will
Oh.
need a lot. So
No, I agree,
there's
but
space
Chile
for
first, and
everyone.
then the others.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Paula. Thank you, Daniel. This
Thank
was
you very
great.
much. Thank you very much for the invitation and for the people that are listening and seeing this. Bye bye. Have a good day.
Bye, guys.